Welcome to our presentation on explaining embryo adoption to friends and family. Today we will be going over some questions that others in your life may have regarding embryo adoption and how you can best handle those questions. I'm Karli Adams, the program coordinator of the Snowflakes program, and I am excited to be presenting this topic to you today. I work with adopting and placing families once the embryos have arrived at the adoptive families clinic, keep track of transfers and babies born, and also help adoptive and placing families navigate communication with one another through this very unique way of meeting each other. So, you've started your embryo adoption journey, you're chugging along through the steps, you're super excited to start telling people about what you're doing, and then once you bring it up, the questions come. Now, questions are expected with any adoption path, but this can be amplified with embryo adoption because it is a much lesser known form of adoption. Today, we will go over how you can answer these questions without feeling pressured from outside opinions and really empowering your decision to adopt embryos. It is so important to have a support system as you go through this journey, and in order to have that, you need to be willing to open up with trusted friends and family about what you are going through on this journey. One of the most common questions that you might be asked is, don't you want your own kids? Other variations of this question can be, have you tried IVF? What about egg donation? They may even have a comment of, having your own kids is so special. Now, the term your own kids can be incredibly harmful, even if the person saying this phrase means well. Perhaps this is the first time that you have shared with your grandmother what you are doing and she has said this to you. Now, this may be because she has not had a chance to grieve the loss of her genetic line and process like you have. Processing your own grief can also aid you in answering questions from others, so it is very important to make sure that you have processed through all of your own emotions as well. The fact is that children adopted from embryos are extra loved because two families decided to give them a chance at life. These children born from these embryos will always be your children and be part of your family, just as any biological child would. It is also important to explain that this is your decision. You have processed through your grief, you have been through your options, and this is the way that you are moving forward. Another common question is, isn't embryo adoption just IVF? The short answer is no, because you are not genetically related to the child. The embryos that you are adopting are also already here. They have already been created and they are frozen and waiting to be transferred. You are not creating more embryos like is done in the process of IVF. Some clinics around the United States do have their own donation programs, but that also varies from embryo adoption. In most cases in clinic donation programs, you only have very basic information and it's mainly just medical. There is no ongoing communication with the donors, even if the child desires it. And this is particularly true if an egg or sperm donor was used in the creation of these embryos. Also, if children from the same egg or sperm donor wanted to connect, they would have to use the donor registry or risk not even knowing that others are out there. Through the Snowflakes Embryo Adoption Program, you will receive 3 generations of health history on the embryos, and any children born from the embryos have the option to communicate with genetic siblings, as well as their placing parents. This is done through a mutually agreed upon communication agreement that is completed in the contracts phase of our program. As a fun fact, embryos cannot be purchased in the United States, while egg and sperm can. So that is also where embryo adoption is different than IVF. The next question that you may be asked is, can the other family take the baby back? As Snowflakes, we have had some families come to us with this fear, and others in your life may be worried about it too. The people who ask this question are primarily thinking of domestic adoption, where the birth mother can choose to parent once the baby is born. When a woman gives birth to a child, her name is put on the birth certificate as the mother, and her husband is listed as the father. They are legally the parents of that child. Embryo adoption does not need to be finalized in court for that very reason. So you could respond to this question with no, in fact, embryo adoption is the most secure form of adoption. It is legally taken care of before we even receive our embryos. The next question we will discuss is, will you have to co-parent? This particular question could come up when you are talking with your friends and family about the placing family and the openness that you will have with them. They may also ask, do you really want another couple telling you how to raise your children? We strongly believe in openness at the Snowflakes program and want families to at least be open to communication with each other. This is beneficial not only to the adoptive couple, but to the child as well. Now, openness is something that is agreed upon in the contract under the communication agreement. This can either be through a third-party platform or direct contact. I also want to let you know that I have spoken to many placing families that want to ensure that they are not stepping on the adoptive family's toes in any way, shape, or form. They want to be sure that the adoptive family knows that this child is 100% your baby and they do not want to interfere at all. There has also never been an instance in the Snowflakes program where a placing family has ever wanted to take a baby back. And if they did, they wouldn't have a leg to stand on. In the US, embryos are governed by property law and are viewed as property, not people. Therefore, you are legally the owner of the embryos via the Snowflakes contract, and as I mentioned previously, your name is on the birth certificate. I would also like to point out that placing families and birth mothers are very different and are at very different places in their lives. Birth mothers are facing an unplanned pregnancy, are often in school working towards their career, and are unable to provide a stable environment for their child. The placing family intentionally created these embryos to grow their family. They are already established in their career and they are actively parenting. When you're explaining this to your family, they may be wondering about how they will play into this process. They may ask you, will the placing family want to meet us? Should I include them in our Christmas cards? Once they understand some more of the process, they may be looking at how they can move forward in supporting you on this new journey of family building. While the placing family may be interested in meeting your extended family or receiving Christmas cards, this will all depend on the agreement set up between you and the placing family at the time of contracts. If you have a very open relationship with your placing family, then as this relationship grows, receiving a Christmas card from your mom may be a point of interest for them. Be clear with your extended family in terms of what your adoption looks like and let them know what your communication agreement looks like, whether it is open, facilitated, or semi-closed. Generally, placing families are comfortable knowing that there is a support system in place, as pointed out in your family profile, without wanting to speak with or meet your extended family. An incredibly common question that adoptive families get, as well as even myself when I tell others what I do for work, is how does that work? So, these embryos that you are adopting are created during an IVF cycle by the placing family. Once they are created, they are then frozen in a special cryo tank. That tank is then shipped to your clinic where you will have a frozen embryo transfer, or FET, and hopefully get pregnant with your adopted child. So these children will not share any of your DNA, even though you will carry the child to term, and they may not look like you, but they will be your child regardless. This response can bring up some other questions as well, so I want to let you know that freezing does not hurt the embryos. There is also no determined shelf life for embryos, so babies can be born from embryos that have been frozen for over 20 years, which is just absolutely amazing. Are there a lot of embryos available? At this time, there are well over 1 million embryos frozen in storage. but in actuality, only a small percentage of them are available for adoption. Others are frozen for continued family building, they will be discarded, or donated to science. You could easily keep the adoption a secret. Why not pretend they are your own? This comment and question can come from a place of genuine concern. Perhaps family members are worried that the children born from adopted embryos will feel left out. Make sure to address this concern from the very beginning of your journey so that there will be no shame felt by the child from anyone in the family. The fact of the matter is that secrets don't stay secrets anymore, especially not in today's age with social media and DNA testing. Be sure to inform the child of their story early. Equipping them with this knowledge will also empower them, and make sure you allow them to make the decision of who to share this information with. There were also many people involved in the child's story, even more so than a biological child, so they may feel a sense of pride in their unique story. Children are also naturally curious and will have many questions of their own, so it is really important that you begin telling them their story early. Following up on the openness conversation, I wanted to talk about the difference between secrecy and privacy. Secrecy can make a child feel shame, and keeping a secret of this magnitude from them can really make them feel as though something is wrong with the way they join the family. Again, secrets don't keep, so this could be incredibly harmful to the child when they find out. They may wonder, is my story really so bad that we don't talk about it? Are they embarrassed of me? Make sure that your child knows that their story is not shameful. Be open with them from the second you bring them home from the hospital so that they can embrace their story and make it a natural piece of the story that they can embrace with confidence. Again, start as early as birth and let them come to you with any questions that they may have. It is important to remember that just because you are sharing your story with your child doesn't mean that everyone needs to know. You may not feel comfortable announcing it to everyone, and in fact, everyone might not need to know. As your child grows and begins to comprehend their story, let them be the ones to tell their story and choose who they want to share it with. In addition to your close friends and family, there may be others around you that have questions about your embryo adoption journey as well. These can vary from your child's teacher to the cashier at the grocery store. You may be super excited to tell the whole world all about this unique form of family building, or you may want to keep it more private. Remember, secrecy can be harmful to you, your family, and your child, so don't keep secrets within your family unit. But you certainly don't have to shout it from the mountaintops either. Here are some questions that others may have about this process. Freezing embryos? That sounds like a science fiction movie. This is a comment that you may receive, and is another one that I have heard when I explain my job to others. While it may sound a little out of this world, it is not a crazy new science experiment. Cryotechnology has been around since the 1950s, and IVF has been around since the 1980s. So in the grand scheme of things, it's really not that old. This cryotechnology is not only used to freeze egg and sperm donations, but also plant and bacteria matter for studies, and it's just less commonly known. So when you're explaining this to people, take the emphasis off of, whoa, that's weird, and frame it as, this is amazing. It is incredible what can happen when you combine the miracle of life with modern day science. Isn't that tough for the kid though, because they'll be born in the wrong decade? As I mentioned earlier, embryos do not have a shelf life or expiration date, and the Snowflakes program has seen many healthy babies born from embryos of every grade and stage. We have also seen healthy babies born from embryos that were frozen 20 years ago, and the child is not affected in any way. The children born from these embryos have no sense of time that has passed and do not come out feeling like, oh man, I really belonged in the 90s. They grow up just like quote unquote normally conceived children do, without feeling like they're born in the wrong era. The only thing that can come up would be if the freezing method is different than what it used to be. Science has advanced, so therefore the older embryos can sometimes be frozen in a different method called slow frozen than, say, embryos that were created 5 years ago would be frozen in a method called vitrified. But the day that your baby is born is their birthday. You won't add 20 years to their age. The embryos actually stay frozen at their current stage of development until they are thawed and transferred into the womb. So these little ones are truly frozen in time, which is just absolutely amazing. Okay, but can you really call this adoption? People can go to clinics, get embryos donated from an anonymous source, have an FET, and continue on with life. The fact of the matter is that this is not simply a fertility treatment. The hopeful result of transferring an embryo is the birth of a child. Parenting a child that is not genetically related to you is the definition of adoption. Because of this, we follow the best practices of adoption, such as advocating for openness, requiring home studies or SFEs, providing you with education, such as this video, and signing the contract, which is a legal transfer of ownership, since, again, embryos are viewed as property in the United States. The bottom line is that children are adopted, not donated. So, yes, you can definitely call this adoption. Why not adopt a child waiting overseas or even in foster care? This question can be difficult because it can come across as insensitive and judgmental. More than likely, though, it is rooted in someone's genuine care for orphans. You can respond by saying, "We do not want to keep other children from being adopted." In the same way that some families decide to foster to adopt instead of adoption internationally, some families, like us, decide that they want to experience pregnancy and childbirth to bring a baby into their homes. Different programs are better for different families. Frozen embryos are looking for a home and loving family as well. They are just coming into our lives 9 months earlier than normal. It can also be beneficial to point out that these embryos were created with the intent of being transferred and born, and that embryo adoption is the fastest way to adopt an infant. Knowing that their embryos were given a chance and were brought into a loving family out of the freezer can bring closure and peace to the placing family as well. Wait a minute, you're Catholic. Doesn't this go against the church? This question most commonly comes up in Catholic settings. To Snowflake's knowledge, no other religions teach doctrine that is opposed to embryo adoption. No, embryo adoption does not go against Catholic doctrine. The Vatican hasn't made an official statement on whether this is an acceptable form of family building or not. Catholic scholars do still debate this topic, especially since they are against IVF, but they are very clear that life begins at conception. It can be helpful to remind people that these embryos are already created, that you are going through an adoption agency, and that you're rescuing an unborn child. Agencies like the Snowflakes program exist to help placing families who have completed their family and are struggling with what to do with their remaining embryos. Most people in the Catholic Church are open to this form of thinking. Is this promoting the use of IVF? People who ask this question are envisioning the large market of infertility and supply and demand. With embryo adoption, this is simply not the case. As we discussed, there are well over 1 million embryos frozen in the storage in the US, and even if embryo adoption was not an option at all, those embryos would still be sitting there, frozen indefinitely. You could answer this question by letting people know that embryo adoption is a solution to this large embryo problem, and certainly is not the cause. You could also remind them that these embryos have already been created, so you are not making more of them. Again, you are rescuing an unborn child and giving them a chance at life. So let's say that you've navigated through the questions and your coworker now has a better understanding of how embryo adoption works. And they tell you, "All right, awesome, how do I buy one?" You cannot legally buy an embryo. Although sperm and egg can be purchased, embryos cannot. Even though they are governed under property law, they hold a special place in the law above gametes and therefore cannot be purchased. Now, this may leave you wondering, then what is my adoption fee for? Your fee for the Snowflakes program covers the placing family's required blood testing, contract fees, shipping fees, and administrative costs. The money that you pay is not for the embryos themselves. The placing family does not make any money from this, so it truly is a gift from the placing family to you. And now that your family, friends, and those around you understand, they've processed any grief they need to work through, and are ready to move forward, they may have a very sweet question. How can we help? Some people may want to be supportive and help you, but they truly don't know how to. Be coming up with some ideas on how they could assist you as you go throughout this journey. Perhaps they can offer you emotional support and can be your person that you can just be normal with. Perhaps they could assist you financially with the cost of medication and transfers. And once pregnancy occurs and a baby is born, perhaps they can help you by organizing a meal train, bringing by dinners, hosting a baby shower, getting baby's closet in order, or even babysitting. Another way that they could support is by helping raise awareness about embryo adoption. Make sure that you address your comfortability and boundaries with them if someone expresses interest in helping in this manner. But speaking about embryo adoption in a positive light can be incredibly helpful, and also normalize it for your child. And be aware that just because they have asked this question does not mean that they won't ask any more. Sometimes it can be an ongoing conversation. But once they understand more, have had some time to process, and have had their questions answered, then they can go back to being happy for you on this exciting family building journey. These are a few common questions that your family, friends, or others you encounter may have about your embryo adoption journey. We hope that this presentation has helped prepare you to answer these questions, in addition to building your confidence in handling these questions. However, there may be even more questions that come up the more that you discuss this topic. Don't hesitate to reach out to me or the Snowflakes team at the phone number and email listed here to learn more about discussing embryo adoption with others. Thank you for your time, and I wish you the very best on your embryo adoption journey.